Start AI companion. No. Okay, it looks like it is recording. It should
All right.
take a notice too.
Yep, we got a
Yep.
notification that it's
Perfect.
being recorded.
Yep. All right. We'll go and kick it off. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Movie Talks and Chill. We're your hosts. I'm Tony Serrato.
Hi, I'm Gavin Butts.
And I'm Patrick Wall.
And our special guest here, if you ladies would like to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'm
Sure.
Janet. I'm Janet Lee. I'm from Safety Harbor, Florida.
Awesome.
I'm Dana Corrigan. I'm in Tampa, Florida.
Yes, we know. And this will be now. We've met a few times now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here for this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes. Patrick got to join us this time for this.
You're a veteran on the show now.
Well, so first of all, well, thank you guys for joining us. It's been a blast when we got to meet you at, Sunscreen, and then when we got to talk to you at University of Tampa to talk about the upcoming festival, which we're super excited about. We can't wait to be out there. But you guys have a project you're working on. I understand that's what we wanted to talk about. So why don't you kind of give us a breakdown of what you got working on?
Do you want me to start, Dana?
Sure.
Okay, great. So, like I said, I'm Janet Lee, and I didn't start off in film. I was a teacher. I still am a teacher. I taught in the K to 12 system up in Ontario, Canada. And I used to teach the kids nobody wanted to teach. They were, the ones who didn't want to be at school. And I was pretty good at kind of inspiring them sometimes, but I had troubles, because it's hard to connect with students sometimes. Until one day, a guy named Arnie Stewart came in off the street and said, "I want to speak to your students." I was like, "What?" Um, so we let him in, and he was kind of against our better judgment. I mean, he looked really dirty. He smelled like cigarettes. He had no note cards with him, and I just thought, my students are going to eat you alive, really. So I kind of stood on the side and glared at my students, and I let him just do whatever it is he wanted to come in and do. And so he stood at the front and he said, "I was in grade 1 for 2 years, grade 2 for 2 years, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. I was 15 and I got kicked out of school, and I couldn't read or write." And he said, "I've spent my entire life bluffing my way through. And I'm here to tell you how difficult it was for me and that you should always ask for help." And we were mesmerized. I forgot I was there glaring at my students to keep them quiet. We were just so enthralled by his story. He told us how he was eating out of dumpsters. He fed his kids dog food by accident one time. He had to follow buses to get home because he couldn't read the road signs. And my students were transformed. And he only talked to them for an hour, but because he was so genuine, because we knew he was the real deal, we all just kind of questioned ourselves and what we were doing there and how we should all ask each other for help and be there. So after he was done, a couple of my students were crying, which is amazing. One of them said, "Miss, look out the window. Do you see that car in the parking lot?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's my family. We live in the parking lot and you didn't know it.
Oh, wow.
Arnie, I need help, And so it was one of those moments where your whole life changes. And I just went up and I said, "You don't know me, but I'm Janet Lee and I want to write your book."
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
And that was 22 years ago.
Wow. And so now we're turning this into, from my understanding, we're turning this into a film project, correct? We're basing this off the book.
That's correct. So eventually, Arnie and I ended up going to 72 more schools together, talking to kids, begging them to do something, ask for help, and begging the helpers to help. And that was like a movement that started up in Canada. Arnie ended up winning the Queen's Jubilee Medal for his work. And they flew him all across Canada. We went international together. And then in 2012, he found out he had cancer and he had 12 days to live. And he ended up actually passing away. But when he passed, he had over 6,000 letters from kids telling him how he and his story had changed their lives.
Man, wow. That's
You know?
amazing.
And it changed me. Like
Mhm.
I'm a different person. I thought I knew all there was to know about teaching literacy and helping people. I thought I was a super compassionate person until I met Arnie and I walked around with him and saw what it was like for him. Like we would go into a bank and they would ignore him because he would say right off the bat, I have low literacy, I can't read and write. And they would go, all right, well, what is it that you want? And he'd say, well, we want a bank account. And they would give him the forms and walk away. You can't do that.
Mm,
If somebody tells you they have low literacy, you sit with them and you work with them.
mm,
And I learned so much personally. I grew up with parents and adults in my life who had low literacy. I helped my uncle fill out checks. I was his support all my life. But I never truly knew what he was going through and what so many people go through, hiding under the radar with this thing, low literacy.
mm.
Mhm.
That's
Incredible
a lot of
story.
info.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's-
So you said, and forgive me, but I just want to make sure. So you wrote the book 22 years ago. Is that correct?
No, I didn't because what happened was I went home and I told my partner at the time, I was like, I met this guy. This is so amazing. I'm gonna write his book. And he looked at me and he goes, who do you think you like? You can't write a book. And I said, what? He said, who do you think you're like? You don't know how to do this. And who is this person anyway? Some weird guy? Like, what are you
Mhm.
gonna do? So I put it down for a couple years. And
Okay.
over those years, never forgot about it. And it took me the next 8 years of working with Arnie. I actually picked it up again,
Mhm.
where I was able to record his voice. And I would sit with him and say, okay, tell me your story. And he would tell me, and then I would take that story in my little MacBook I had, and I would go through it and painstakingly pull out all the and ahs and the ums and every time he opened his mouth, like there was a clicking sound. So back then we couldn't just pop it in AI and get
Right.
all
Yeah.
of the pipes out. I had to like cut, splice, pull it together, cut, splice, pull it together. And there's 4.5 hours of audio that I have.
Wow.
So
Damn.
and I guess it was 3 years ago, maybe two. No, it's 2 years ago that I actually took the audio and had AI help me to transcribe it. Because to
Mm.
pay somebody to transcribe it was a big deal back then. But
Yeah.
now I did that. I hired an editor to help me. And I was shopping it around to different publishers saying, I want to publish this in his authentic voice. I want it to have mistakes in it. I want it to look different. I want it to have on page 100, I want it to say, congratulations, you made it with all bunch of stars to page 100. I wanted it to be a book for people who had low literacy and were reading their very first book ever. And so
Mhm.
nobody would publish it, even though I'm a published author. They would say, Janet Lee, there's a bunch of mistakes in it. What are you going to do about that? And I'd say, well, I'm leaving it. So I ended up having to self-publish, which was the best thing ever because I could do whatever I wanted. So when you look at when you look at that book, it's kind of like, wow, this is different. You justify on one side of the page, it's straight, and on the other side, it's jaggedy because
Mhm.
people with low literacy or people who struggle, they see shapes, and if you
Mhm.
justify both sides of a text, it's a square. But if you got jagged edges on one side, you can keep track of where you are in the book.
Okay.
Oh,
So it
okay.
just it took me a long time. I put pictures in and lots of and I also paired it up with the audiobook. So, and I learned how to do it all myself because I didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's expensive to do all the
Oh,
things
yeah.
we do,
Yep.
but because
Especially if you
it's
get Morgan
taken.
Freeman.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But see, but Arnie's voice is very mesmerizing. And if you hear it, like it's just really beautiful. And the way he tells his story is so authentic. It's there's funny parts in it and there's parts that make you cry and make you think differently about noticing people like Arnie. And so the book is meant to be listened to and also read. And if you look at the cover, there are headphones around the art because it's meant to be listened to.
Mm.
And I feel, when he was on his last few days, I went up to Toronto and I sat with him in his hospital bed and he said, I want you to promise me that you'll keep going. And I promised. And so that's why 22 years later, I'm still doing this. And I will not stop until his story is shared with as many audiences as possible. And I know the best way to do that is through the medium of film.
Mhm.
Well, that's kind of already then answered my question. I was going to ask, like, what made the thought process of transitioning to film? Because we met people who've written books. Actually, just had
Yep.
an interview, last week or the week before.
End of 2020.
Yep.
Yep.
And he had done a novel. He's a novelist, and as he said, as he was writing the novel, he already had it in his head that he wanted it to be a screenplay and a film and everything. So, it's always interesting to hear how things kind of transition
Yeah,
from one medium to
process,
the
yeah,
other.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I was, when he passed away, I was very devastated by it. I was down here in Clearwater, he was up north, and we were best friends, Arnie and me. And when he passed, I grieved for a long time. But then I just started picking up speed again. I started telling his story. I went and got my master's in instructional design. And then I was being asked to get on podcasts like this one. And I just started talking about Arnie because people were like, well, what was the day that changed your life? All right, let me tell you about this day. And so I tell them about the day. And I did this one podcast for instructional designers, went all across Canada and the US, the world, but really focused on Canadians in the US. And this man reached out to me and he said, I'm Louis Chesney. I want to connect with you. Do you have a minute? I'm like, all right. And I'm very, very hesitant to do that because you don't know who people are.
Mhm.
But anyway, I got on with this guy and he says, I'm neurodivergent. He said, I grew up and I had selective mutism, meaning I didn't use my voice for many years. And finally I learned how. And now he said, I'm very interested in film projects. And I love your story and I want to see it as a movie. And I went, what? What? And I'm like, I burst into tears. It was a very emotional moment for me. And he said, no, I want to help you do this. So within a week of Lewis and I talking, I was in touch with a guy named Scott DuPont. And Scott is this guy that helps you raise money for movies. I didn't know you had to raise money. I thought if you got discovered, Hollywood was like, boom, here you go.
Here's a blank check.
Yeah, right. That's a rare happening.
So I figured that would happen. That's not true, right? You got to raise your money. So Scott started to help me do that. And within a couple days said to me, I know an Emmy award-winning director who might like this story. I said, all right. And he said, you want to pitch? I said, sure. So the next thing I knew, I was pitching to Sylvia Kaminer, who is Emmy award winning. She does a series on PBS, Places to Love. She did a documentary about Rick Springfield. I think it's called Places of the Heart, or it's one of his songs. It's the name of it. She'll kill me if I don't get it right. But anyway, I pitched to Sylvia and her crew band, and she by the time we were done talking, said, yep, we're on board. What do we do? I said, all right, well, come visit. She did that. And then it was that time when the writer's strike was happening. Do you remember that? Like
yeah.
very
Yep.
recently. Nobody was working. Nobody was supposed to be working. So the film crews had time. And I said, well, let's go to Canada. We're going to go back to Cobalt and we're going to see if we can film some of these locations. And hey, why don't we have a memorial service for Arnie? And she said, all right, well, it needs to be produced. So I learned how to produce it. And I noticed that it would cost me about, it would be a lot to get the film crew to go up. I don't know if I want to say how much, but I didn't have the money. So I said to her, I'm going to mortgage my house. She said, no, don't do that. Please don't do that. I said, all right, I'm going to cash my pension in. She said, oh gosh, please don't do that. Janet Lee, don't. So I said, all right, well, I'll get the money somehow. And I ended up doing it anyway. So I cashed in my teacher's pension and paid for it. And I flew them up there. We met up there. I didn't know if anybody would show up. I hadn't been up there for 10 years. But when we landed, the mayor of Niagara Falls wanted to meet us.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up changing the color of Niagara Falls to blue to match Arnie, cobalt blue. He worked in Niagara Falls on the bridge, the Rainbow Bridge.
Okay.
We got up on the bridge. They put me on CBC. Like the minute we landed, I was like David Hasselhoff up there. But more importantly, like Arnie was David Hasselhoff, like Arnie is this Canadian hero. And we got great footage up there. And I organized it all. And I had the audacity to say, yeah, I'm just a teacher. Like I don't really know how, but I'm going to pretend like I know how. And I'm gonna learn. I mean, there's so much you have to do. You have to get insurance, you have to get a carnet to get over the border. I had to do all sorts of like crazy stuff because when you get to the border, they want to see all your equipment. They want to know you're not taking, jobs away from Canadians. It's really something else to get people up there. So I was excited to do it, and it freaked me out. It was terrifying, but isn't that what life is about?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Oh yeah. No, that was a big risk though. That was awesome though. Because a lot of times you hear people they say that there's certain things they do or they can't do, or but a lot of people do like the what's it like the GoFundMe type stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But no, to do that with the pension, that was a very bold move to do that to get this thing done. So clearly shows how much you care about the project. And it sounds like it worked out.
It has worked out. Because that old cliche, it's about the journey, you know what I mean? That and we all kind of roll our eyes, whatever, whatever. I want to see my movie on the screen. But really, it has transformed my life and it's so exciting, when you have a problem with the film, like I thought to myself, all right, I got archive footage of Arnie. But I got nothing of him growing up in Cobalt with 12 brothers and sisters. I got nothing. I got no footage of him being lost on the street or sleeping in his car. I got nothing. And then one of the cameramen said to me, he said, "Well, why don't you animate it?" And I said, "Animate it?" I said, "Well, okay, I don't know how that would ever happen, but that's a great idea. Thanks, Doug." And then about 2 years later, I went to this brunch and I wasn't supposed to go. Everybody
Oh,
is
we got a little bit of a freeze up here.
Oh, you got me?
There we go.
You back? I
Yep.
went to this
Yep, we got you
We
back
have
now.
an unstable internet connection. It happens with
Okay.
Zoom.
All right. So I went to this brunch and it was for filmmakers.
Mhm.
And I'm telling you, like, if you don't think, like, if there's a place in film and you don't feel like you belong in a place, I will give you this advice. Go anyway. I bought a ticket, something like $75, and I went in there, I dressed up and I went in there and I sat there like I was somebody that belonged in a room with filmmakers. And I just sat and I looked across and there was Dana. And Dana just turned to me and she said, "What's your story?" And I pitched. And it turns out Dana is an award-winning animator. And not only is Dana an award-winning animator, she has students. She teaches at the University of Tampa, where I got my master's when I wanted to go back to school. That's where I got my master's. So I know the University of Tampa. I respect that. And when I pitched to her, she was really, really open to it. And you could see something kind of click in her mind, and I'll give it to you, Dana. I could tell that she was interested. I didn't know how we would animate it, but we did come up with something cool. So I'll hand it to Dana. I've been talking way too long, but I just got to say there's people that will get involved with your project and it's really like you attract the right people. And you can tell when they're full of baloney. Like you can tell when people are not really
Right.
who they say they are. The more you
Yeah.
do this, like I have gotten no's so many times. I have an envelope full of no's. But when I met Dana, she really was somebody that could take this places. So Dana, I don't know. How do you want to go with this? I don't know.
Sure. So I figure I'll kind of talk about what led up to the meeting because it was an interesting like series of circumstances, just like you mentioned. So I'd been teaching at the college level since 2011, and I used to teach at the University of South Florida, University of Tampa, and then I've also taught other places that weren't college level, like Elite Animation Academy. And I also had a project that took a long time to make. So that focus of working on the same thing for a long period of time, it's definitely something I can relate to. And there had been years ago, around 2016, 17, my project that I wanted to work on was kind of like pseudo shelved. I would still draw a little bit, I'd think about it, but I had to work on other things. I also did freelancing, and I worked for a lot of places and was mostly just trying to, survive paycheck, paycheck. And the series of circumstances happened where ultimately it led to me deciding, okay, if I don't start working on this project at some point, it's never going to happen. And I'm going to end up growing old and being like, oh, well, I could have done this thing and I didn't, because it never felt like the right time to start. So finally buckled down, worked on it, took a while. And part of my feeling was when I was working on it, because you don't know what's going to happen with it. Like, well, I could spend all this time doing it. It could be a bomb. Everybody could hate it. And, it was a waste of time. But I kind of felt like, well, no, even if all that happened, the creation of it wouldn't be a waste of time. The experience would take me to places I wouldn't ever be able to go if I didn't at least try. And I'm always somebody who's like, got to try. At least I know if it didn't work, then it was because it wasn't meant to be, and not because, oh, if I had tried a little harder. So during the production of that project, I ended up meeting my business partner. We formed Pencil Gator Animation Studio. And then as I was finishing it, UTampa had an opening for a tenure track full-time position. And when you go for tenure track and that's like it goes through a period where after 6 years, if you get tenure, you're there forever, unless you do anything egregious. So I was actually able to use my project as part of the presentation, because it's a process to try to get that position, which includes doing presentations on your research. I was able to use my project and I got in. So I started tenure track fall 2024. And part of the tenure process is uh, like there's the teaching and the service, and there's other elements, but the big one, and the one that's one of the most challenging, is scholarly. So making things. Now, most people think writing and publishing books. That absolutely counts. You could definitely do that, and a lot of professors do. I'm not quite that's not really my skill set. It's not my strength. So I was lucky though, because one, creating animated projects does work, does count. Two, they had a lot of support for my studio. So the University of Tampa, when I was applying, already knew about Pencil Gator because I already worked for them as an adjunct, and they already knew what I was doing with them. And approved of the studio, was happy that I had a studio. They're like, yes, keep making, keep making things. And it was fine to work on business projects. It was fine to work. We had to have a team with me when we'd make things, which is great. And so when I knew when I was hired, I kind of turned on a radar. I always sort of have a radar on anyway, but especially with the support of the university. And I'd sort of keep an eye out for projects, because make my own took so long. Making your own from concept to completion takes a long, long time. And I love making my own things, but also like, okay, well, I have the support of the university, and now I have stability from being a full-time teacher. So I don't have to worry about survival as much. Now I need to think about creation, making projects, working on things. And I'm like, well, what can I do to help the community? Because I'm like, I would love, I like stories, I like creating, animated shows, and I love doing that stuff. But I also wanted to keep a radar out for, well, what are ways that I could use animation to help the community, to reach out in a way that, I'm a technical person, I'm an artist and art tech. I don't have knowledge, or limited in other realms, but I felt like mine could be a vessel to help areas that don't know anything about animation but could make good use of it. So that was kind of the mindset I had at the time that I met Janet. And I was sort of new to festivals. Sunscreen 2024 was the first festival I had ever attended, and that was when I knew I was hired by UTampa but hadn't started yet, because I got hired, sometime in early spring, and then to start in fall. So I'm somebody who likes to go right away. Big on that inertia. So I was already kind of turning on the radar and meeting people and talking and trying to take advantage of networking opportunities. So I'm the type when it comes to networking events, I get a little shy or nervous. So I try to like put myself out there right from the get-go before I let my nerves overcome me. So I think I
I
come across.
100% get that.
Oh yeah. So when I went when I finished my project, we also had a client's project that came in during the production, and we finished them at the same time, roughly at the same time. So both my project and our client's project started going through the festival circuits concurrently. Well, our client's project, Shoes All Walks of Life, we worked under Vincent Castro. His film got into Dunedin Film Festival. And I wanted to go to festivals whether we got into them or not, but especially if they got in, because I can come and be like, yeah, we worked on this. Our film is showing or showed, this day and time. So I went there, and I loved going to any of the networking events. They had a ladies filmmaker brunch. I'm like, let's do it. So I went there, and I was a little nervous, but I'm like, I'm going to meet as many people as I can. I got my business cards, put myself out there. So we were at this big round table, and I'm like, hi, I'm Dana Corrigan. Hi, pleasure meeting you. Yeah, so what do you do? What's your story? And then I did that to Janet, and she pitched, always ask for help. And some things I think about when I'm receiving pitches, because I've definitely have had situations before I became a professor, or before I started working full time. I'll sometimes meet people who are like, "Oh, you're an animator?" I'm the idea person. I come up with the ideas, and then you could do all the work for free, and then we'll split it half and half because I'm the one who came up with the initial idea. And you get a lot of people like that who don't put
Yeah.
any work into it, and it's just like a really vague concept. And most of the time, I'm like, if I'm going to do that, I'll do my own ideas, because then if they flub, because they can, you never know. It could even be a good idea and just not take off.
Mhm.
Nothing against them. But also, I'd come to learn that the initial ideas usually are like a rock that all the refinements and all the feedback and all the everybody working together is what kind of refines that rock into a beautiful, ore. So I pay a lot of attention to, like, where's the project at? Who's the person I'm speaking with? What effort have they put into it so far? How far along is it? How realistic is it? And so at the time, like, she already had all the live action footage done. So I'm like, oh, she's she's on it. She's on task. And and I was already thinking about the animation style for it. I'm like, okay, well, this is something students can do. Because if I can involve students, or if it's a paid project, then I have my team, my professional animators, and then I can get them funded. Or if it's like, say we're trying to go for funding, or maybe it's shaky, or it's off and on, or limited, then I think about, okay, well, can my students handle, some of the work, and then I oversee and help teach them, because a lot of my students are like, hey, do you have any business work we could try to get involved in? We want to, puff up our portfolios. And I'm like, well, her project's a really good candidate for that. And, or at least it feels like it could be. And I really liked her story. Like, I really liked what she wanted to do. I'm like, this is what I'm looking for, is something to help the community in an area that I could involve my, area of expertise, um, to help promote and boost, a really wonderful project. And so I forget what I said verbatim, but I think it was along the lines of, like, we'll figure it out. Yeah, like, we'll find a way to make this project, happen. I'll see, about doing internships with students. I was just starting to get into the grant spaces. So I'm like, this would be a good candidate for a grant, I think. At least we could try. And so I've been working with her since then, and that was late January, I think, right, Janet?
That's right. And we've come quite a long way since we started. So, but anyway, we'll stop there if you want.
So yeah, we've done some so we start off with some animation tests. She had some minor, like, test animations kind of already made as kind of an ideation, like, oh, this is kind of what
Well,
I'm looking at.
well, you know what I did. So I
Oh.
took a I took this piece of art that a student drew, because like I said, we have thousands of letters, and in
Mhm.
those letters, the students are always drawing pictures of Arnie. So I got this really cool illustration of Arnie, and then I put it into AI, and I took, well, I want to put it in a different program, and I removed the background, and then I put it into AI, and then I jointed him. So I made his legs move, I made his knees bend, I made his arms swing, made his face change, like I changed his eyes and his mouth, and then I put it in this program, and I put it on like a real photo of a gymnasium, and I had him walk across the stage and get to the podium, right? So I had this thing, and I put layer upon layer of different like tools. I did it. And I
Mhm.
showed it to Dana. I'm like, look, this is what I've got. I remember
I was like,
Dana said, Dana's like, how did you do this? What tool did you use to do this? And I said,
yeah, I was still a little new to AI at the time. I'm like, what did you, I'm like, did you puppet pen? And I'm thinking like After Effects and,
no.
Mhm.
I said,
okay.
well, what tool didn't I use to do this?
Yeah.
All of Adobe Creative.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
right. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's where it started. But the idea is that we're taking the actual drawings and we're layering them. So some kids drew a picture of Arnie in his car, in his little Volkswagen Beetles, this yellow car that they drew of him. So okay, great. We'll take that car and then
Yeah.
we'll take that Arnie, who happens to have really long legs. And the reason he has long legs is because the students were looking at, like they were sitting on the floor when he was speaking to them. So he looked really tall. He had these really long legs. And we put Arnie in the car. And then we put the car on a lined piece of paper, right? And we made clouds that had shadows and we made signs. Now, what's cool for me is when we're working with the animation students who are working with Dana, is that they are learners, you know? And we say to them, okay, what would it be like for Arnie? Okay, well, he wouldn't be able to read the signs. Okay, but what would the signs look like? You know, and why would they be so scary? What would a stop sign look like? And we've had these very kind of intricate, deep conversations about what his experience would have been.
Mhm.
And so that when students or when audiences are watching this film, they can be in his shoes. And I really love that kind of point of view that we're able to bring forward. And I know Arnie would be beaming with pride to know that these animation students are learning how to animate his story, and they're learning it in many different levels and layers, right? Like how to do it, but also how to make it meaningful without it being like in your face.
Mhm.
I'm inspired by the whole thing and how it's coming along.
Yeah, it's been an interesting process in the animation standpoint because that's something that we have to think about. How do things move? What is the character, the person thinking? How do we represent that? And in animation, you can be kind of inventive about it. It doesn't have to be like exactly what is happening in reality. We can stylize it however we want to. And with her animation, with the animation test that she showed me, that she had done with AI, it had the children's drawing and the photo, and it gave me a quick idea, like, okay, this is what, because you have your like what I think when it's being described to me, but then once you see it visually, like, okay, I see what you're going with. Okay,
Mhm.
and we have lots of children's, drawings. I'm like, that's really cool. Okay, I like what she where she was going with it because it's one, it's kind of a retelling of his stories through the eyes of the children and also what stands out to them, and there's like an innocence to it and a relatability to it. And there's something in things that we think about in animation are one, why is it animated, why animation at all, why not live action or live action recreation, why not, a book, although this one was a book too, a comic, why animation at all for any project, and then what does animation give for it.
Mhm.
And then why the style? Um, what are like? Do we want to go hyper realistic? Do we want to go Looney Tunes? Do we want to go avant-garde?
Mhm.
And any of that. So having the children's drawings, like, okay, that makes perfect sense why we want to do that. And it was interesting because we started working on an animation test for what that we did that my students were doing, and I was kind of I was like consulting them and would give them feedback and technical demos. So I'd kind of redline, or if there was something that they wanted to do or we needed to do in After Effects or Photoshop or anything and they didn't know how, then I would do a share screen and I'd show like, okay, this is how you would do those these maneuvers.
Mhm.
And that way the students can would get some more experience that you don't get inside the classroom, which was, I think, a value of doing internships. And some of the interesting challenges are like stylistic consistency, or like if you have multiple children drawing in different styles because different people draw in different styles, or there's some assets or things that he'll talk about where there isn't some elements there aren't any children's drawings for that particular thing. So I'm like, okay, well, in that case, what do we do? If the children drew something else, like, oh, well, they were talking about this school, but in this child drew a different location, like a store or something, but it kind of looks, because children's drawings, they're not, hyper photorealistic. So we're like, okay, well, should we use that instead and maybe modify it a little bit for any of the iconic imagery, or should we draw something ourselves? So sometimes we would draw some of our own elements if there wasn't something there, but also a priority in the authenticity. Like, okay, how much can we do that? How much should we rely only on children's drawings if there isn't an existing representation? Like, should we modify something to try to make that work? And then how do we put them all together if the drawings are a little different from each other? Because different, like Arnie could be drawn by 5 children in 5 different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
so
was
you
gonna
might,
be that was gonna be my question was, where did you settle on what style to use with having so many, different
Yep.
styles to be able to pick from those drawings?
yeah, that's an excellent question too. And there's not always a 100% right answer. Like, oh, it's obviously going to be this is the right. That'd be great if that existed, but it doesn't, or not always. There can be multiple ways of tackling the same thing, and each one could have its benefits and its risks. So we're working on an intro scene, or like a test animation, where we were like, okay, well, here's the challenges we're running into, and we would note them as they would occur, and we'd have meetings where we'd talk about it. We're like, okay, let's make a strong decision, because we can't just keep batting back and forth looking for the perfect answer. You won't. So we would make a strong decision, then we would see that decision through, and in the context of this animation test, and then see how's it looking, what do you think? And then have colleagues look at it, get feedback, and then kind of go back in and make adjustments. So we have done a lot of back and forth, work on a shot. Okay, I think this looks good. Work on a next shot, which brought up an issue that we hadn't really thought about in the first shot. I'm like, oh, let's go back.
And also, I'll say it was really cool for me to be able to be that subject matter expert. So I would come in and hover over top of it and go, okay, wait a minute. If he were walking through the snow, this is what it would be. It needs to change. The trees don't look right.
Yeah.
This needs to be the right place, and I'm not seeing that here.
Yep.
So they were making changes based on my experience being up north. And to me, that makes it authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just a quick side note, Janet, I can see the photo you sent in chat. That's adorable. That's just fantastic. I don't
So
know if
you
our
see it
audience is
like,
gonna see it.
oh my gosh. Well, yeah, maybe I don't know how they can, but it's basically like there's two letters, two
Mhm.
different kids. One kid made Arnie wreck into that little down the hill, and we've taken that car and Arnie's big long legs and put him in a brown jacket. See, they changed his outfit because he's outside, and the car now has snow on it, and the sun is from another kid's drawing. There's also lined paper behind it, so the whole thing is occurring actually on a piece of paper.
Mhm.
Nice. It's awesome. And I will also say real quick, going back to when you said about, the drawing and making all the signs and animating, like getting the perspective, like what does that person think? I think those are great because, as everybody, human beings, our minds go in crazy places. And one of the ways you can make it go as crazy as you want is with animation, because there are no rules to it. Like you watch Looney Tunes and stuff like you brought up,
Yeah.
or Hanna-Barbera, there's a rock, crushing somebody, they're flat, then they, blow on their finger.
Is that a
pop-
real
No, they're
company?
not a real company. But like going back, because what I was picturing in my head, if I was a person who had, literacy issues, and if I'm in an area and there's a bunch of signs, like let's say I'm driving down the road when you brought up the sign thing, and you get to a point and it's like just sign after sign, and I can't tell what they are, they're different colors. All of a sudden, I'd almost imagine like in my head, like just a big one turning into a big monster, just like scaring the life out of me because I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
One's flashing at me, and next thing you know, you have lights and everything. So as you were explaining that story, that's kind of what was running through my head of like getting a perspective.
Well,
That sounds
it
really
was so
similar to what you said,
interesting.
Janet.
Pardon?
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I'm like, I think you've mentioned something like that before, Janet.
Yeah. So when I
That's
first, like, I drew, because I've been doing a lot of painting, and I did this drawing of the signs actually being very angry, and getting bigger and getting mean. exactly like what you said. And then I've enlisted the help of some children lately saying like, we need a couple assets. What do you think? So a student named Rain, he wasn't our student, but he knows Arnie's story. He drew a monster for us, and it's a shame monster. So this monster is so scary. I don't know, Dana, how do you describe it? He's got like big teeth, and he's kind of like he's like almost like an ape who kind of comes at you, and he's blue, cobalt blue, which is where Arnie
Mhm.
grew up in Cobalt. But anyway, when Arnie has these thoughts of shame and fear because of literacy, we're imagining and envisioning that monster kind of appearing and
Yeah.
lurking.
Yeah.
And you can do that in animation. And I
Right.
know Arnie would be like, yes, that's what it was. That's what it feels like, to be so fearful of somebody finding out. But he also said, I was afraid of words. I was afraid of a big word. I wouldn't be able to read it, and I would be embarrassed. And that was always a fear of his. So yes, animation can add that element that real life can't.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely can add that perspective to, like I said, because we're rational people. Like our minds go in most irrational places when we don't understand something
At the
or
most inconvenient times.
yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, very much.
Yep. And I mean, just think about it when you have dreams,
Yeah.
even the ones whether you remember them or they're vivid or you don't remember them, but there's just crazy things happening in your dreams that you never would normally happen, but yet we feel like it's happening to
Oh,
us.
well, you wake up when you're falling too. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I thought it was just me.
No, I wake up when I hit the ground.
Yeah.
Actually, Dana, I have a question for you. Going back to speaking about how you and your students had to fill in the animation gaps from the children's drawing, is it difficult as an animator to look at a children's drawing and then replicate something not as artistic or as fine as you normally would do in animation or drawing?
That is an excellent question because yes, we ran into some challenges with recreating some of the art because it was like we have to fight our own artistic training sometimes, and like we would switch to I know at least one of our interns would switch to her left hand, so or her
Okay.
non-dominant hand,
Smart.
so that the lines would be incorrect. We would or shaky and not steady. We also had to be careful on how we like as artists, we're trained to like be able to simplify to like basic shapes and such. And we did that, but sometimes we did it in too trained of a way, too strategic of a way, and kids can't do that yet. So that was something we would have to do is we would do some drafts and then we'd kind of compare it to the children's drawings and we're like, you can kind of tell this is done by a professional. We gotta adjust it. We would also start doing it on paper because the digital drawings didn't quite sometimes it depended on what we were drawing, but sometimes you could tell it was digital. And so we would get like got some crayons
Hmm.
and would draw it on paper, and then segment it out in Photoshop, just like we would do with the children's drawings. We also had some spaces, so like what gravel would look like on asphalt. Well, kids aren't going to really render that. It looked strange and like we filled it in with crayon. Sometimes we did that with skies, but we started using construction paper. So I've got a bunch of construction paper, and I would just kind of like crunch it up and mess it up because kids aren't going to be pristine with their stuff. Scan it and then adjust the colors because I'm like, okay, we don't have asphalt color, as a
Yeah.
construction paper, so we would nudge it and then kind of give it a collage effect. Another challenge we were running into is so we would make storyboards for like what's going to be happening. Well, sometimes you'd have angles that would be more helpful in actual storytelling, like being able to, oh, if we use this angle, this is an angle that's really helpful for showing the scene and what's happening, but kids don't really draw on this angle well. So how imperfect do we make it? And where do we put in like mistakes, like intentional mistakes? Because it can also make it look like, oh, well, is it going to look like we don't know what we're doing or we don't know how to draw? Um,
Oh.
and it's the
You can
same
tell
thing.
them about the font too, Dana.
Yes. So Kylie did the font. So we had we took and by we I mean Kylie, we took I believe the letters from the children
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
made a font that's based on those letters. Now, and it's funny because an interesting challenge I remember Kylie going through was she said that not all children, you don't get a lot of letters with like an uppercase Q on it too
Mhm.
often and stuff like that. So for those that didn't have that, well, we couldn't find a letter that had that particular, alphabet, and whether it's capitalized or not capitalized or numbers, she'd have to make it up. So she's like, I'll switch to my non-dominant hand. And it looked
Yeah,
it
it came out great. I love the font, and we call it Arnie's handwriting. It's not his, but it's actual letters from the students writing back then.
Yeah. So we started using it for all of our like signage, and we end up making a pitch deck for a grant, and we used it for that pitch deck. And some of the feedback, we're waiting to hear back on the grant. But some of the feedback we had gotten was they loved the unification of the style, so the graphics and the font, because we definitely mentioned like, yeah, that font was made and it's based on handwriting.
You might be able to, sell it off to Microsoft for their
Yeah.
Microsoft Word to add it to their list of fonts they could use.
I mean, they make
Anything to raise
alphabetically,
money.
they'll buy anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're actively fundraising, so that would definitely help.
We're almost there. Like we've got a Seed and Spark fundraiser going, and I have a fiscal sponsorship happening through From the Heart Productions. We just, any amount is helpful to us. We're so close. We need to finish the animations. We have a wonderful editor on board now, James Lemming, and he's working to categorize the 4 terabytes of footage we have.
Wow.
And I'll see him someday this year, I hope, when he emerges after that. But and then over the Christmas break, like the winter break, we'll work to create that story arc. This is a ginormous story. So much has happened. I mean, ugh. One of my favorite parts was taking that book back to Cobalt. Arnie has passed, but his brothers and sisters actually showed up. So he had 12 brothers and sisters, most in their 70s and 80s, walking up to see their brother's book. And
Oh, wow.
I lined them all up, and we sat at card tables, and we handed the books down the line of these grown-up children, brothers and sisters of Arnie, and they signed the books. And I gave them
Wow,
all,
nice.
it was hilarious. I gave them all, where's my pen? I gave them all special pens. And the one brother, Tommy, he didn't say a word the whole time. He's differently abled, Tommy. And the only words he said were, "Do I get to keep this pen?" Yes, Tommy. So they all had the pen in their pockets during some of the photos. So I mean, so much has happened, and I would like to include all of it. I don't know what this is going to turn into. I hesitate to call it something because it has morphed and become bigger. Just 2 days ago, Dana and I were asked to present the project in the First Nations at the Yukon Territory. So they virtually put us in front of teachers there, and we talked about this project and talked about storytelling and how we can really honor our elders that way. And many have signed on to say, look, teach us how to do that. Teach us how to help students animate stories of their elders. This can be way bigger than we first started to think it could be or was. And I'm excited. And like I said, I hesitate to define what this thing is going to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so what would be let's say this, a hopeful or an optimistic goal for the completion of the project? Let's put it that way. What are your guys' goals?
Assuming you get the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we are getting the funding. Are you kidding me?
I would assume, Patrick.
That's fair. When you get the funding.
Yeah, it's not.
Oh,
if it-
thank you. Thank you. Yes.
But really, like if you do have like a kind of a timeline, say, hey, our hopeful goal would be, by February, by December, by mid, next year. Like, what would be the hopeful time frame to have a full completed project?
Janet, I could try to answer if that would help.
Okay.
Oh, sure, sure.
I'll
And
answer too, because I have a date in mind. But go
oh,
ahead.
awesome, awesome. I know something, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on anything, Janet.
Yeah.
I know something we were thinking about. We're doing like a series of like episodes because
Mhm.
as Janet mentioned, it's such an expansive story that yeah, and features are not, yeah, features an option. Like there's a lot of material, and there's I think like different threads or different stories that we could focus on in there. That's been one, I know one of the things we were thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's can be that way. And um we do have a narrative script written. Joe Davison wrote us a beautiful narrative script, and it's ready. So as soon as somebody sees us and wants to get on board, every person that we talk to about it really gets excited. And if they do have a heart for this topic, they want to get on board. And we ask, why you? Why now? Why this? And I really feel like this is the perfect time for Arnie's story to come out. We need to combine as a community of people, knowing that it's safe to ask for help, but also noticing the people that ask and taking action to help them. Notice the helpers, look for the helpers. Mr. Rogers always used to say that. Look for
Yeah.
remember that? Look for the helpers because that's when there's hope. And Arnie's favorite word was hope. And I really think that right now, even though the Janet Lee of 22 years ago would be so upset to know it's taken this long, but it's the perfect time. This is when we need this message. So I'm hoping by, hey, Dana, my birthday, May 13th, maybe
Mhm.
we can have this. We have something that is maybe the documentary ready, but
Yeah,
at least something that we can share with others and just get that story out there because it really is about Arnie and what I promised to do. I want to finish that.
absolutely.
No, that's fantastic.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, that's overall, it's just an incredible
Oh,
story. I
yeah.
mean, just like,
And
just wonderful. I mean,
I don't know if you noticed, but we were quiet for the first 45 minutes because
yes,
we
yes.
were listening to
And I don't lean forward that often.
Yeah.
Really? Oh,
But no,
thank
it was
you.
great. I want to make sure that just we got a little bit of time left,
Yep.
but I just want to give if there's any other updates or info or anything else you guys wanted to add before we have to head off here. I think we got about 5-10 minutes left.
Probably around
Yep.
closer to 5, I
Yep.
would say.
Say the Seed and Spark. Jen, I think would be good.
Right. We're really honored and excited that Seed and Spark accepted our proposal to be on their site. Their site is for filmmakers, and it actually, you can go and you can search for us. It's Always Ask for Help is the name of our project.
Yeah, I can link it in the
And
chat.
yeah, you can link it.
Oh,
Great.
yes, please.
Here's the cool part about them and what we put in there is that we have incentives. So let's say like you give us a certain amount, you give us $25, you're gonna get a thank you, you're gonna get maybe a phone call, or we have an animation set up specially for you. And it's like Arnie rides by in the car and the signs go by, and then the one sign comes up close and the squiggly words turn into thank you, Tony.
Oh,
Thank
Huh.
and basically, what we're saying is you have helped literacy by donating to us. So there's one incentive that happens, and it's personalized for you. But then there's this one that I really love. So I think it's like $300, right, Dana? It's $300. You donate that, and then we have our child artists. We've got two of them on hand right now. We have Rain, who did our Shame Monster, and we have Aria, who is in Pittsburgh, and she's only 7 years old, but she's an amazing artist, and she will take your photo. So you send us a picture of yourself, maybe wearing your signature hat or wearing your bandana or your necklace you always wear, and she will draw you, and then you can be in Arnie's movie. And we call it a cameo, which I love.
Nice.
So Arnie, so he went to the No Frills store and he bought the food, right? And there you are, Tony, standing at the register, like, ringing him up. It's cool.
I have done that job before.
I've heard that.
I did too.
Yes.
I was really bad at it, but I did too.
Me too.
Right? So, I mean, there's incentives like that, but there's also, they're the best incentive, there's the books that the brothers and sisters actually signed. I have several. I made them sign a bunch because they are our treasures. There's, I think I have 20 left. But for, I think it's $1,000 incentive, you actually can have one of the books that Arnie's brothers and sisters signed. And it's just really special. So
very cool.
that's the cool part about Seed and Spark is that you can put incentives in.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, do you have something?
No, I was just going to let Dana know that when I got the link, I did copy it, and
Yeah.
we'll make sure to be sharing that with
Yeah.
as many people as we can.
Thank you.
Oh, we appreciate that so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Well, we have this has been a blast actually getting to hear this story. Like I said, we've met Dana a few times, and we sat down with her, and then she said, "Hey, we got this. I know this person I want to introduce you to," and so I'm glad we all got connected. And so just want to, on behalf of us, thank you so much for taking the time and
Definitely.
sharing this story. It's great.
I'm looking forward to when this film comes out.
Absolutely. And we'll be, this one will be coming out, this episode will be coming out this Wednesday. So that's why Dana was saying if you could just send me the link as soon as possible, I'll get on to editing it. It'll be on YouTube and all our platforms. I will send you guys the email. I've sent you the links before, Dana, in our other interview, but I'll resend them to you guys. So Janet has them as well. And then if there's any additional links or information you guys want to share for us for, potential, fellowship and whatnot, just make sure you put that in the email to us so that we can add it to our posts and everything in social media.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much.
Awesome, guys. Well, again, thank you so much, Janet. Thank you, Dana. To the viewers out there, Dana, Janet, always ask for help. We'll be giving you guys the links and the updated information in our post coming up on Tuesday for the episode to come out on Wednesday.
Yep.
A lot of other fun stuff. Dana will also be talking soon about the upcoming festival. It's only a few weeks away, so we're ready to go. We're super excited. But again, just on behalf, thank you guys so much for joining us. And to the viewers out there, until next time for Movie Talk and Chill, we are your hosts. I'm Tony Serrano.
I'm Gavin Butts.
I'm Patrick Wall.
And our special guest.
Jan
Dana Corrigan.
All right, ladies, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one, everyone.
Okay.
You too.